Hello, my name is Emilio James de la Cruz, and this is my presentation on the Winter War. The Winter War was a war between the Soviet Union and Finland, which occurred over the course of 4 months. The time frame for this war was November 30th, 1939 to March 12th, 1940, putting this war right at the beginning of World War II, 3 months after its outbreak, but before Russia entered the war against Germany in 1941. As the name entails, this war occurred in the winter and mostly took place on the land bordering the two countries, Finland and Russia. And shown here on the screen is an image of the Finnish People's Army trekking the snowy landscape of the war. The entire war can be stemmed back to 1917, where Finland officially declared independence from a newly formed USSR after defeating the Red Guard in the Finnish Civil War. In the succeeding years of the 1920s and 30s, the Finnish relations with Russia smoothed out, as Finland aimed to achieve neutrality and ally themselves with other Scandinavians, mostly their neighbors in Sweden. The USSR even offered multiple non-aggression pacts with Finland in the 1920s, most of which were declined until 1932, when a renewal finally led the Finnish agreeing to the pact and signing it. The map here displays the status of the Northern European countries. The red are the Soviet Union, the green are the neutral countries, the gray is Germany, and the orange countries are neutral. However, they have the USSR occupying their military bases. In 1938, the USSR's foreign policy shifted. They now aimed to reclaim provinces and land that they had lost during the Bolshevik Revolution and Russian Civil War period, which included Finland. Keeping this in mind, the Soviets began negotiating with the Finnish, requesting that Finland declare war against Germany with the offering of full economic and military aid. This was because of fears that war was possible between Germany and the USSR, and that Germany would use Finland as a base of operations. Finland kept up with their policy of neutrality and declined the offer, which was not satisfactory to the Soviets. Negotiations continued, with the USSR slowly reducing their demands, and yet the Finnish would not yield. However, in 1939, the USSR and Germany signed a non-aggression pact named the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, which eased the Finnish worries. However, the actual motives behind the pact were to divvy up the spheres of interest between the two nations, with Finland falling to the USSR's. The first picture on the screen depicts the signing of the Soviet-Finnish Non-Aggression Pact, while the second picture depicts the signing of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. In October of 1939, the USSR began demanding more from Finland. As shown on the map, the Soviets demanded that the border between the two countries be shifted westward, as well as the Finnish ceding 3 different islands to the USSR. In return, the Soviets would cede the areas of Repola and Porajärvi to Finland, an area nearly twice as large as the ones demanded from the Finnish. However, Finland would decline this offer and produce multiple different counter-offers, shifting the location of the new borderline and changing the amount of land given. The original offer took place on the 14th of October, the first counter-offer on the 23rd, and another counter-offer in response to a new proposal occurred on the 3rd of November. The counter-offers gave the USSR much less land than they wanted, which resulted in the offer never being taken and the negotiations left unresolved. Instead, the Soviets, who had already done rearmaments near the Finnish border the summer prior, staged an attack from the Finnish where they bombed a Russian village named Mainila and blamed Finland. This incident provided an excuse for the Soviets to exit the non-aggression pact between the two countries. The Soviet forces then invaded Finland on the 30th, hoping to incite a revolution within the country from the working-class civilians, allowing for an easy reclaiming of the land. This did not ring true, and the civilians stood behind their government, cementing these events as the beginning of a war. One of the core aspects of this war was the military differences between the two nations. On one hand, the USSR completely expected for the war to end within a couple of weeks, similarly to the invasion of Poland done by the Red Army in Germany. One military commander by the name of Kirill Meretskov thought otherwise. as he reported that the terrain of coming operations is split by lakes, rivers, swamps, and is almost entirely covered by forests. The proper use of our forces will be difficult. There's also the fact that in the years prior, Stalin had purged the majority of the army's high-ranking officers, leaving many factions without proper leadership. These factors led to the invasion taking over 3 months. In comparison, the Finnish were fighting on their own land, meaning that they had the advantage on this part. This allowed them to use guerrilla tactics to speedily outmaneuver the Soviets. However, the Finnish army was incredibly lacking and relied heavily on draft due to its population size, severely lowering the skill of it. The weather was also an important factor, as the Finnish knew how to ski well, which were incorporated into the guerrilla attacks, and the Soviets were massively unprepared, leaving many of them frostbitten or sick during the war to the sheer coldness. The image here shows the two different armies in the war, with the middle duo being Soviet prisoners of war from the Red Army. The two on the outside in white are Finnish army members guarding these two Soviets. The war's turning point would be the Soviet attack on the Karelian Isthmus front on February. The Soviet army kept increasing their bombardments on the Finnish, slowly wearing the defenders down. These bombings were used in tandem with small infantry attacks and air bombings, slowly wearing out the really strong thin Finnish soldiers. The constant small attacks meant that the Finnish could not fight back as easily, and the Soviets were able to break through on the Second Battle of Sama. By the 11th of February, the Soviets had amassed a large faction of soldiers, artillery, tanks, and aircraft that were deployed on the Karelian, and were constantly receiving more recruits, totaling to almost 500,000 units. In comparison, the Finnish only had around a third of that size, around 150,000 units. The Cossack attacks forced even more retreats into Finnish lands, further exhausting the troops. By mid-February, the Finnish people were already losing the energy and resources to keep up the war effort. Similarly, the USSR had lost a large number of soldiers, and political ramifications of the war were great. There was also a looming threat of the British and French intervening to aid Finland. With all this in mind, both sides agreed to enter negotiation by February 29th. In the beginning of March, the Red Army began marching further into the Karelian Isthmus area, which the Finnish responded with an armistice proposal in order to halt the war. The Soviets declined the proposal in order to maintain pressure, and thus were able to further strengthen the military threat within the area. By March 9th, the Finnish government was running out of time, as the Finnish military situation was growing dire with the number of losses and lack of resources, as well as the lack of foreign support coming to aid anytime soon. This led to the Finnish president being forced to sign the Moscow Peace Treaty, which would cede more land than was previously demanded by the USSR in their pre-war demands. Finland lost around 11% of their original territory, but were allowed to keep their independence as a nation. The effects of the war were greater on the USSR than the Finnish, as they had lost over 300,000 soldiers compared to the 65,000 soldiers that the Finnish had lost. The huge loss that the Soviets suffered in turn led Germany to believe that the Soviet Union was weak, and thus a prime target for invasion, which, as we see throughout World War II, that the belief was incorrect. Finland did, however, take Germany's side and spark another war with the USSR in June of 1941, which was named the War of Continuation, and ultimately ended in a Soviet victory in an armistice in 1944. The overall relationship between the two countries would find settlement in 1947 when an official peace treaty was signed in Paris. And here are the works cited.